Lord Moylan, not moved. And we now come to Amendment 62, Lord Moylan.
I'm most grateful. My Lords, I realise we are coming to the end of the bill, so I shall endeavour to be fairly brief, but I think the subject I propose to raise by way of these two amendments is quite important. Generally, this is a good bill at a technical level, but it assumes that automated vehicles are going ahead and are going to be deployed. In fact, there's been very little debate with the public about what the consequences of this might be for our streetscape and for the urban landscape in which we live. The debate, there's been a failure, in a sense, on the government's part to sell and explain to the public what I call the look and feel of automated vehicles, as opposed to the technical matters dealt with in this bill. And I think, if I may say so, that it was a mistake of the government when it published its vision document, its policy document on this subject last year, not to have brought it perhaps to the floor of the House for a debate at some point, so that noble lords could have been able to comment at least on what they thought the consequences might be. An illustration of that failure, I think, is the debate we had earlier this afternoon on accessibility. The fact is that disabled people and the rest of us simply don't know what the bill is going to mean for them in practice. And they ask these questions of my noble friend the Minister, and they get very exiguous answers, which do not really satisfy them as to what their experience is going to be when these vehicles are deployed. And that's true in other realms as well. My amendments, the amendments standing in my name, number 62 and 63, are here simply to probe these questions. And it may not be a very long debate, but I think it is important to raise them. 62 relates specifically to manual for streets, and that is to do with the way in which our streets are designed, whereas 63 is broader and takes account of the operation of the streets, how they actually function, and the legislation that covers that. To a certain extent, manual for streets and design sits within the broader operation, but I've separated them out because there are two sort of different questions there. And it's worth saying in relation to manual for streets that when it was published in 2007 and its complementary second part published in 2010, it was very widely welcomed by people who are interested in this area. And it has been due for an update for quite a long time. And I believe, indeed, a contract was let 2 or 3 years ago to one of the chartered institutes in order to prepare a draft. But as far as I'm aware, my noble friend will correct me if I'm wrong, it has never been republished so far. We're still waiting years on. And I don't understand why this should be. So I would ask my noble friend, before I go further, if he can first of all give us an indication of when the revised version of Manual for Streets might be published, and secondly, if he's able to tell us whether it is going to take account of any of the consequences for the design of streets that might rise from the introduction of automated vehicles. Now, I was involved in quite sort of innovative and imaginative, I hope, streetscape design ideas for some 15 years as the deputy leader of a London Borough Council with personal responsibility for that area, as deputy chairman of Transport for London, and during the whole of that time as chairman of Urban Design London, which I had helped found back some nearly 20 years ago, and so forth. And what we were trying to achieve was the removal of clutter, for example, particularly guardrail along paveways, pavements, the scrapping of sort of one-way highways through the centre of London, like Piccadilly, and their reversion to sort of more natural two-way streets. The promotion of shared space, in short, the sort of the humanisation of the urban experience, and that is what we are trying to achieve. Now, how will those ambitions be affected by the introduction of automated vehicles? Now, the government has a clear, robust, but fundamentally unconvincing response to this, and that is to say that there will be no changes. Automated vehicles are simply going to have to respond to what exists And if they don't work with what exists, then they won't be allowed on the road. That is, as I understand it, the government's position. But the reason I describe it as unconvincing is that I simply can't imagine. Take guardrail as an example. We know that automated vehicles will be designed so that, as far as possible, if somebody steps out in front of them, or if a cyclist goes across their path, they will automatically come to a stop. They will detect this obstruction ahead of them, and they will stop. Now, that exposes the entire urban network of automated vehicles to frivolous activity on the part of people who actually want to stop them and bring the whole thing to an end, if they choose to do that. I can't believe that with the amount of money that is likely to be required as an investment from the private sector in automated vehicles, there won't come at some point manufacturers turning up at the department saying this can't go on. We can't be putting up with all this. The whole network is... We're not going to invest in a network that can be brought to an end, brought to a stop on this basis. What we're going to demand is let us have the reintroduction of guardrail. Let us have designated pedestrian crossing points on the streets that everyone will have to move to. And let us indeed potentially, for the first time I think in England, criminalise jaywalking so that people can be fined for crossing the road. And that is naturally what they're going to ask for. And at that point, I find it very difficult to believe that the government is going to turn around and say no, because they will have taken the bait, they will have sold the idea that there are millions of green jobs or blue jobs or whatever jobs we want to call them in all of this, that the investment is good for Britain and so forth. And we'll have put this apparatus, which this bill does, this legislative apparatus, this technical, insurance-based risk management apparatus, all of which is, much of which is sensible. I mean, I know there are detailed questions about its operation, but fundamentally I think everyone in the House has agreed that this is a necessary component. But it's cart before the horse. It's putting the framework in place before we know what it is we actually think it's going to look like when it's deployed. Now, I've given just that one example of guardrail, but I could multiply them. In the interests of time, I'm going to stop with that one example. But I do think these are really quite important questions, and I feel fundamentally dissatisfied, not with the content of the bill as such and what it's trying to achieve, but with the government's approach to it, which seems to me to preempt discussion about who benefits from this, what is its purpose, and what are the attractions we're going to find in it, and allowing us to debate that when the bill actually effectively excludes it. My amendments simply open up a brief moment at the very end of committee. I realise it's people want to go, people are understandably thinking of further obligations in the course of the evening, and they probably may not want to debate it at great length, but I do think they're important questions. Any contribution would be helpful, but a response from the Minister which is a little bit more than what has been said before and a little bit more convincing than what has been said before would, I think, be very helpful.
Proposed, clause 99, page 71, line 1.